Hey everyone, it's Jay Smith here from Grand River Sports Medicine. I'm here at my home office. I just wanted to tackle a question in relation to climbers that I get all the time, and it's something that typically people may not necessarily seek treatment for, but it affects us all, and that's distal interphalangeal joint finger pain in climbing. So we're talking about our last finger digit where we bend towards our fingertip, and people experiencing pain with that. So, what do we do about that pain? How do we prevent it from happening? And if we're injured, how do we help manage that? So, the first key is to understanding why exactly that pain happens. It's very simple. We're exceeding the load tolerance of our joints. So, we have great research within the climbing world and also within the running world on other joints about how our joint tissues adapt to different levels of stress. There's lots of data from the German national climbing team, from Dr. Volkel-Schoeffel, and from other climbing-related researchers. And in the running world, there was a great systematic review in 2017 on how cartilaginous changes occur in our knee in relation to adaptations to running. So, in a nutshell, when these joints get flared up, we're exceeding the tolerance level for them, okay? So it means we're pulling way too hard on small holds before our joints are ready for it. I've got a little tension block here to show you exactly what I mean here. Specifically, when we get in the half crimp position, we get into a position of hyperextension at that D.I.P joint, okay? And that's a much more stressful position than when we're in a larger hold and we're in an open hand position. As you can see with that, we have a flexed position at the D.I.P joint, and it's a little bit safer for the joint itself because we put the load a little bit more on the tendons. Okay, so we're small holds, half crimp position, and we're overloading that. That overload can be acute trauma, so a single incident where, let's say we're on a small hold, our feet cut, and we get an acute load to those joints, right, and we get a flare up. But more often it's cumulative overload. So the overall load we're putting repetitively in our session is too much for the adaptation that's occurred in our finger. So I alluded to our research. So our research within the climbing world shows these great physiological adaptations that occur to our fingers as we climb and as we continue to climb over the course of many years. And we have, kind of a standard curve that occurs. So as you approach a certain climbing level, so going from sedentary towards recreational climbing, we have positive adaptations occurring in our fingers. So our tendons, our pulley systems, our bones, our joint tissue, the surrounding ligaments, all those tissues generally get stronger and thicken, and they adapt to be able to handle those loads. If we continue to add load beyond a certain point of recreational climbing, getting into the competitive and, depending on how many years of adaptation you have, we get a point of diminishing returns where the load on our tissues and the tissue breakdown that occurs from that load exceeds the rate of repair, in which case we get overload, joint swelling, joint breakdown. So we've got positive physiological adaptations, and then we've got negative physiological adaptations. So if you're on either end of that spectrum, too sedentary, not enough load, or we have too much load, not a good result. If we're right in the middle and we're adapting appropriately to our load, that's where we get the maximum adaptations there. So essentially, the reason why it occurs, again, we're putting far too much load cumulatively in that half crimp position on too small of holds before our tissues are ready for it. So what do we do about it? Simple. We keep the acute and the accumulative loads low and within our tissue tolerance so we don't exceed that. So how do we monitor this? Generally, pain is a good guide for monitoring this throughout your climbing session. So if during your climbing session, an acute load, so putting weight on a single, handhold, if that pain exceeds a level of more than 3 out of 10 approximately, that load is too high. And again, more often we see the injuries from cumulative load, so you'll want to monitor the overall volume of climbing in a single session and how much we're pulling on those small holds relative to what our body is used to. think about your average climbing volume and your finger tolerance over the last 3 to 6 months. You don't want to exceed that by a massive amount in a single session. So if you have joint pain more than an hour after climbing in those D.I.P joints, that's too much. You need to dial it back a little bit. Okay? Very simple. Another thing that we can do is warm up our joints progressively. So the thing that warms up those joints is progressive loading in that half grip position. Okay? Tyler Nelson talks a lot about recruitment pulls is an amazing tool for warming up those joints. So again, you want to get on a small edge size to your tolerance, and you want to slowly start to load within that half crimp position and pull as hard as you can tolerate over the course of 3 to 5 seconds. Release that load and repeat a number of times. And Tyler has some great information on his Instagram page and on his website with Camp for Human Performance. We'll link that in the description below. You could also, do this on the wall warm up. So maybe before you hop on your 12A project, that's a crimp ladder with bad feet, you hop on a 10A crimpy climb with good feet, and you use that to progressively increase the load on that tissues. We never want those tissues to be cold and have experienced no load before we maximize that load during our session. So warm up is very important. Another thing that we can do is hangboard. So hangboarding is the most controlled manner that we can put a controlled load on those joints. So again, thinking about that curve, we want to be right at that maximization of threshold where we're hitting that load in the sweet spot where we maximize our physiological adaptations without going too far. And hangboarding is by far the best way to do that. A general protocol is the minimum edge protocol by Eva Lopez-Rivera. Eric Horsts speaks about it extensively on the Training for Climbing website. Very good description there. And I'll put a link for that down in the description below as well. It's a great starting point. What else can we chat about there? So if you are already experiencing an overload, very important to get an assessment. People will not think that an assessment is valid. It's a very small joint, you can climb through it, but this will set you back months if you don't address this right off the hop. So if nothing else, it's good to chat with a professional like myself, a physiotherapist or somebody experienced with climbing and injury management, to gain perspective on exactly what injury you're dealing with and what you can do to help yourself. Even if you're not coming back for treatment on a regular basis, you're empowering yourself so that you can manage the injury better long term. If your climbing volume and your load needs to remain high while you're experiencing joint pain, for example, you're preparing for a project, you're going on a climbing trip, you have a competition coming up, something that's very important to you, there are ways that we can mitigate the load on here. Taping is one of them. So simple circumferential taping using a light strip of tape just proximal to the joint and slightly overlapping that D.I.P joint is highly valuable. We like to use Leuco tape at the clinic. It's a brown, very stiff tape. So what happens is when we go into that half grip position and our D.I.P joint wants to hyperextend, the tape will take a percentage of that load. Okay? It will limit your ability to fully bend there, but it's a trade-off that we take in that. So taping can have a lot of value there. The other thing is trying to modify the way that we are climbing. So instead of always getting in that half grip position, try to get stronger in an open hand position so we can take the load off that temporarily and decrease that cumulative load throughout our session. Please let me know if you guys find this information helpful. If you're looking for more information on finger rehab and climbing-based rehab for finger injuries, check out the blog I wrote on our website, and all feedback is welcome. And I hope you guys find this helpful. Chat with you soon.